Hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and in this video we are going to draw some beautiful watercolor wildflower in Procreate on the iPad Pro. So go ahead and create a new canvas and we're going to get started. I am personally going to be using the pre-textured watercolor file from the Ultimate Watercolor Toolbox because it has some really cool paper textures to it, but you can just use a regular canvas. I'm also going to use some watercolor brushes again from the Ultimate Watercolor Toolbox, which I will link in the description below along with a promo code if you're interested in checking it out. But you can still follow along the tutorial just using different brushes that you like. So the first thing we are going to do is create a new layer by clicking on the plus icon here. And with a nice bright and saturated color, depending on the color that you want your flower to be, you're going to select a brush that has sharp edges. If you do have the dark edges watercolor, go ahead and take the dark edges watercolor. And you are just going to draw your first petal here in the middle. And you want something that is not perfect. So kind of a rounded triangle that has some really funky shapes at the top. You're then going to go back to your layer menu here and click on the plus sign to create a new layer. And on this new layer, you are going to draw 2 more petals on the side. And these are going to be a bit thinner, but you also want them to have some funky shapes. So nothing too straight, not like perfect ovals that would not be good, just something a little bit cool like this. We are going to create one more layer, and you guessed it, you're going to draw some more petals. This time they're going to be smaller and around the bottom, and you can kind of have a few of them poking here at the top too if you want. Just like that. On this last layer that we created, I quite like to blend the edges a little bit. So if you have the watercolor toolbox, go ahead and select the water blender. Otherwise, you can just use this blending tool here. And just blend the edges in the middle a tiny little bit. And you can even do it on the other double layer here too. Awesome. Now we're going to lower the opacity of all the layers. So go ahead and click on the N here, and depending on the brush that you used, you might have to lower the opacity a lot or not at all. In my case, I quite like to lower it somewhere between 40 and 50%. So just go ahead and do that on all 3 layers. And this is what will give your piece a watercolor feel. We are also going to create even more of a watercolor feel by erasing some parts of the creation. So go ahead and double tap on the eraser, which is going to open the brush library. And again, if you have the Ultimate Watercolor Toolbox, you're going to pick the Color Shifting Brushes brush. Otherwise, go ahead and pick a soft brush. So if you go in airbrushing, for example, you could take this 1, 2, 3, the 5th one. But yeah, I will be using the color shifting brushes. With a fairly big size, what you want to do is just erase some parts to add even more texture to it. So you're going to have to do it on the separate layers. And this is not something that has to be precise at all. You just want to add more texture to your piece. So something just like this I think looks really good. I might actually erase this one a little bit more. Great. Once you have your basic flower shape here, you are going to want to merge the 3 layers. And the way to do that is you go back and open your layer panel here. And with your finger, you're just going to squish the layers together, and now they're going to become one layer. Once you have that, you're going to select the selection tool here at the top, set it to freehand, and you're going to draw a funky shape on your flower. We're then going to feather that funky shape somewhere between, somewhere around 20%, I will say. And in the adjustment panel here, you are going to select hue, saturation, and brightness. And you are going to play with the hue a little bit, probably moving it to the left, but that's going to depend on the color you want your flower to be. But basically what you want to do is just add some color variation so it doesn't look as bland and uniform, because you know watercolor kind of has a bunch of different colors blending together usually. Once you're done, you're just going to tap again on the selection tool here, and now you're going to have a bit color variation. You can repeat that step a couple times if you want. I'm going to do it, and I quite like to, around the top, bring the brightness up a little bit and lower the saturation, just so it feels like the watercolor is washing out a little bit. So I'm going to do it one last time here at the top, feather it around 30% this time, and really lift the brightness up. So it just feels like your flower is like disappearing in the paper, which I think is a really cool watercolor effect. Speaking of watercolor effect, we're going to add some special effects that feel totally watercolor-y, and you might not have these brushes. They're really specific to the Ultimate Watercolor Toolbox, so if you don't, just skip ahead to the next step. But if you do have the Ultimate Watercolor Toolbox, go ahead and drag or grab the salt brush, which if you've watched any of my tutorials, you know is my favorite brush. And making sure you are on the right layer, you're going to start from the outside towards the inside of the shape, and that's just going to add, you can see, some really cool pale speckles, which, you know, is just a really nice way of adding some details and textures to your piece. You are then going to create a new layer, and with your same color again, you are going to grab the splatter brush this time with a fairly small size, and on the opposite side of where you just added your salt brush, you are going to add some splatters. You might have to try a couple times just to get something that you really like. And once you do, you're going to open your layer panel again and click on this little N here, which is going to open your blending modes. And you are going to pick linear burn. And that is a subtle effect, but it just blends in a bit better when you do that. The last thing we are going to do is we are going to add some outlines, and that is what makes this piece really, really special. So go ahead and create a new layer again, and you are going to set it to linear burn as well. And you are going to pick a dark brownish type of color. So something kind of in the orange, but fairly dark and desaturated. And you're going to pick a sketching type of brush. So if you have the Ultimate Watercolor Toolbox, I suggest using the coloring pencil, but otherwise you can just take a brush from sketching here. And you're going to roughly, it's too big, with a thin brush, you are going to, roughly draw some very simple outlines around your petals. And you don't want to have something that is exactly, surrounding the color. You want to have something that is really kind of just giving some sort of a shape, some idea of a shape. And you want to have these gaps and these overlaps here. That's really what you want. And you don't have to go over all your petals. You can just do a few. And you can even pretend that some petals are there that you just didn't color. And once that is done, you're going to go over and add some squiggly lines in each petal starting from the middle here. That is going to give a lot of direction to your piece and just make it look super professional. Even though, it's a fairly easy thing to do. People don't have to know it's easy. People can just think, oh wow, that's like a really cool piece. That person know what they're doing. And finally, if you have the Apple Pencil, you can tilt it so the stroke that you draw is just a bit thicker, and you're going to draw kind of a circle here in the middle, or like a darker shape, I should say, in the middle. And the last thing we're going to do is draw the stem. And to do that, I quite like doubling it. So instead of drawing just one line like this, which you can do if you want, I quite like drawing two. It just makes it look just a bit more interesting. So that was it. If we group it, and if you draw a bunch of them, you can make some really cool bouquets or flower arrangements. You can make some wreaths, or you can use whatever color you want for your flowers and have some really, really cool results. I always love to see what people create, so if you use this tutorial, make sure to share the result with me either on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And if you liked the tutorial, give it a thumbs up. If you have an idea for a tutorial you would like to see, comment below. And make sure you don't forget to subscribe because I put out new videos every week.